I woke before sunrise because our shared inbox chimed twice while Travis was still upstairs. 2 new emails had arrived in the address we used only for bills and taxes. The first confirmed a temporary membership suspension for an account I did not recognize, while the second mentioned a legal preservation request affecting community records. Before I could finish reading, Travis appeared barefoot, saw the subject line, reached for my phone, and whispered, "Close it now. It's nothing important." Coffee splashed across the counter as his hands started shaking visibly. I froze because I had never seen him react to ordinary email before. He grabbed paper towels without looking away from my screen and kept insisting somebody must have spoofed the company name. I asked, "Then why delete it?" He hesitated, opened the trash folder, emptied it, and answered, "Habit. Junk is junk." The explanation landed weaker than the panic I had just watched with my own eyes that morning, before breakfast ended quietly. I said nothing else, then simply nodded once and watched him leave for work. After the door closed, I restored the deleted messages from the account history because curiosity suddenly felt safer than trust. Neither notice accused anyone, yet both referenced preserved records and restricted moderator access until further instruction. There was also a support ticket number and a case reference that looked painfully ordinary. Nothing about the language sounded emotional, which made it impossible to dismiss as marketing bait or random spam anymore to me that day alone inside our kitchen, with silence lingering everywhere afterward, while my heartbeat slowly settled again downstairs. Instead of confronting Travis, I closed the laptop exactly where he had left it and waited for him to come home. Whatever frightened him had arrived before I knew it existed, and that mattered more than any explanation he might prepare. I looked once more at the preservation request before shutting the screen and realized my marriage had quietly changed the moment he tried to erase an email instead of answering one simple question. From that second forward, I trusted his fear more than his words because evidence had arrived. I waited until Travis left for work before opening the support ticket again. The company name led to a private membership website that looked polished enough to belong to a professional training business instead of anything secretive. Every page spoke about managing complicated personal situations with consistency, discipline, and emotional control. I almost closed the browser until a section labeled Moderator Sessions appeared beneath the membership options. The archive was partially visible because several public previews had not been removed with the suspended accounts. I opened the newest session and watched a short introduction where a woman's voice welcomed members before the video blurred. Her profile identified her as Brooke Ellis, one of the community moderators. Seconds later, another moderator joined the preview, smiled at the audience, and introduced himself simply as Travis. I replayed those few seconds twice because hearing my husband's voice inside a place he claimed did not matter was harder to dismiss than anything written inside an email. Another preview loaded automatically and displayed both of their names beneath the title of an upcoming workshop. Brooke explained, "People trust routines more than explanations," while Travis added, "If your story stays consistent, most questions disappear on their own." Neither of them sounded nervous or uncertain. They sounded experienced, comfortable, and completely accustomed to teaching strangers how to protect lives they clearly believed should remain hidden. I sat perfectly still because I was no longer wondering whether Travis knew this community existed. He was helping lead it. I continued through the public pages without signing in or contacting anyone. The lessons covered scheduling, communication habits, travel excuses, and maintaining separate relationships without creating obvious contradictions. Brooke handled the practical examples while Travis explained how to answer uncomfortable questions without inviting more of them. By the time I closed the browser, I understood something that frightened me more than the affair I had started to suspect. My husband and Brooke were not simply participating in a secret community. They were the people other members trusted to teach them, and whatever had triggered the preservation request had interrupted something far larger than either of them expected. I reopened the preservation notice and read the case reference instead of the membership details. The number led to a public court filing involving Allison Reed, a woman I had never heard of, and attorney Grant Wheeler, who had requested discovery during her divorce. The filing never mentioned Travis, Brooke, or the community by name. Yet it asked the court to preserve online communications connected to a platform that allegedly helped conceal relationships, travel, and financial activity. I read the request twice before I understood the simplest and most frightening part. Nobody had gone looking for my husband. Someone else's divorce had stumbled into the place where he had been hiding. The preservation notice suddenly made perfect sense because it had never accused the moderators of anything. It simply ordered the platform to stop deleting records while discovery moved forward. Every archived lesson, private discussion, moderator reply, and account log connected to the request now had to remain exactly as it existed when the order arrived. The legal language sounded cold and procedural, but that ordinary wording explained Travis's panic better than any confession ever could because he had reacted before I even understood what the notice meant. That evening, Travis walked through the front door, already looking at his phone instead of at me. He refreshed the same screen several times, frowned, and quietly muttered, "Why is it still locked?" Before realizing I was close enough to hear him. I asked whether work had been difficult, and he answered too quickly. "Just a system problem. It'll be fixed tomorrow." A notification from Brooke appeared across the top of his screen, disappeared almost immediately, and he turned the phone over without opening it in front of me. He was not acting like someone worried about an affair being discovered. He was acting like someone waiting for access to something he desperately needed to reach. I watched him through dinner, while his attention drifted back to the phone every few minutes. Nothing else happened inside our kitchen. Yet his silence grew heavier every time another refresh changed nothing. By the time we went to bed, I understood the legal hold had already done something neither Brooke nor Travis expected. It had frozen the one place where they believed they could always rewrite the past. And for the first time since I opened that email, I realized the evidence was no longer waiting for them. They were the ones waiting for it. The next morning, Travis left before I finished my coffee, carrying his laptop and the second notebook he usually kept locked in his office. 12 minutes later, another preservation notice reached our shared inbox and confirmed that moderator accounts would remain restricted while discovery instructions were pending. The message listed archived sessions, private replies, uploads, and administrative records that could no longer be edited or removed. I read it twice because the restriction was broader than a suspended membership. Travis had not lost access to a website. He had lost control of everything stored inside it. He came home early and went straight to the small desk beside our bedroom without taking off his jacket. I heard the rapid tapping of keys. Then silence, followed by a sharp breath when the screen refused him again. "Why won't it open?" slipped out before he noticed me standing in the doorway. He lowered the laptop and forced a smile. "The company changed its security settings," he explained, but his hands remained flat against the keyboard as though pressure alone might restore what had been taken. During dinner, Brooke's name appeared across his phone 3 times, each message arriving faster than the last. Travis turned the screen away, typed beneath the table, and finally carried his plate to the sink after barely touching the food. I caught only one line before the phone disappeared into his pocket. "We need to remove the old sessions." The notice had already made that impossible, and the urgency in Brooke's message showed they both understood it. Later, Travis reopened the laptop and tried another login while I folded laundry across the room. The page returned the same restriction notice, then warned that attempted changes could be recorded during the hold. He closed the computer so hard the sound carried through the apartment. I did not confront him because nothing I could say would tighten the lock further. For years, Travis had depended on reaching every problem before anyone else could see it. Now the original records remained untouched. Every attempt left another trace, and the system he trusted no longer answered to him at all. The next morning, I returned to the archive and opened the oldest moderator preview still available. Travis appeared beside Brooke beneath a title about maintaining consistency across long relationships. At first, the examples sounded generic, until Brooke described a wife who always checked flight times because her husband traveled for work. Travis answered, "Give her one true delay. Then let that explain the missing hours." And I recognized the exact excuse he had used after a trip last spring. I opened another session and heard Brooke mention a spouse who called twice whenever a phone battery died. Travis explained, "Answer later with frustration. Not apology." Frustration makes the delay feel ordinary. I remembered standing in our kitchen while he blamed a dead phone and acted irritated that I had worried. The lesson date matched that night. What I had lived as confusion, they had packaged as instruction. The next preview carried a label I could not ignore: primary relationship case study. Brooke introduced the scenario without names, but every detail belonged to my marriage. From our shared billing address to the way I handled Travis's travel schedule. She described how the wife responded to canceled dinners, delayed flights, and sudden work emergencies, then praised the moderator for adjusting his explanations based on her reactions. I stopped the recording because I understood that Travis had not merely lied to me. He had studied me. I reopened the session and listened to the end. Travis calmly explained, "Once you know which detail makes her stop questioning, use it consistently," while Brooke added that successful members should track emotional responses after every excuse. My patience, my routines, and even the questions I asked had become material for people paying to deceive someone else. The affair hurt, but this was colder. Brooke had not simply entered my marriage. She and Travis had turned it into a product. When I closed the laptop, nothing inside the room had changed. Yet I no longer saw our history the same way. The evenings I had forgiven, the trips I had questioned, and the explanations I had accepted were now arranged inside archived lessons. Travis had used my trust twice, first to protect what he was doing, then to teach strangers how to do it better. The preservation notice remained unchanged, but the public court docket did not. A new filing appeared under Allison Reed's divorce case, confirming that discovery had formally begun, and the judge had authorized production of preserved platform records relevant to the request. It was written in plain legal language with no dramatic accusations. Yet one sentence stood out because it confirmed archived moderator material would now move into the discovery process. The records Travis had been trying to reach were no longer sitting untouched inside the platform. They had started moving beyond his control. I watched Travis refresh his email before leaving for work. And this time, he did not even try to hide what he was looking for. Every few minutes, another notification arrived, each one disappearing almost as quickly as it appeared. He opened one message, stared at it without blinking, then quietly whispered, "They're releasing the files already," before locking the phone the instant he noticed me walking into the room. He did not explain who they were because he knew I had never been supposed to hear those words. That afternoon, I checked the docket again and found another routine filing from Grant Wheeler confirming receipt of the first production. It did not reveal the contents, but it confirmed documents had already been transferred under the court's discovery schedule. The legal process no longer depended on Travis logging into anything or Brooke finding another workaround. The evidence had begun leaving the place they once controlled, and every completed production reduced the value of every excuse they still hoped would protect them. When Travis returned home, he looked exhausted in a way I had never seen before. He wandered through the house carrying his phone from room to room, refreshing the same messages without speaking, then finally sat in silence after nothing changed. I realized I was no longer waiting to learn what had happened inside that community, because the court had already answered the only question that mattered. Discovery had begun unlocking the records one production at a time, and Travis could do nothing except watch them leave his reach. I no longer needed to guess what Travis and Brooke were trying to do, because every new filing confirmed the same pattern. The preservation order remained active. Discovery continued moving forward, and the moderator records stayed frozen exactly where they had been when the court stepped in. Nothing in the docket suggested anyone had been granted permission to revise, replace, or erase those materials. The silence inside the filings carried more weight than any accusation, because every unchanged record meant the past had stopped moving. Travis spent that week chasing access he never regained. He opened his laptop before sunrise, checked his phone during meals, and refreshed the same pages until the screen timed out on its own. One evening, he whispered, "There has to be another way." And almost immediately, another message from Brooke appeared, asking whether anything had changed. He answered within seconds, waited for a reply, then read the next message with a look that told me everything before he slipped the phone back into his pocket. A day later, another routine notice appeared in the court record, confirming the preservation obligations remained unchanged throughout discovery. It contained no dramatic language, yet it quietly confirmed that protected materials would continue to remain intact while production moved forward. I thought about the archived lessons where Brooke explained how to control a story by changing details before anyone noticed. That advice no longer belonged to them because the records had reached the one place neither moderator could influence. Watching Travis became strangely simple after that. He was no longer trying to persuade me of anything, because his attention stayed fixed on doors that refused to open. Brooke could message him. Travis could refresh every screen he could reach, and both of them could hope for a different outcome, but neither could rewrite a single lesson, remove a single reply, or erase a single record preserved under the court's order. For the first time since I opened that unexpected email, I understood the real consequence of the legal hold. Their greatest advantage had never been the secrets they kept. It had been the ability to edit those secrets afterward. And that advantage was gone. I waited until the house was quiet before packing a single suitcase. Travis sat in the living room staring at another screen that no longer answered him, refreshing pages that had already become part of someone else's discovery process. He never noticed me carrying boxes to the car because his attention remained fixed on everything he could no longer reach. The silence between us felt different now because it no longer came from secrets. It came from consequences that neither Brooke nor Travis could edit away. Before I closed the front door, Travis finally looked up and asked, "You're leaving?" I nodded once and answered, "You left long before I did. I just needed time to understand when it happened." He opened his mouth as though another explanation might still change something, then stopped without speaking, because every explanation I had heard over the years now belonged beside the archived lessons where they had first been practiced. There was nothing left for either of us to argue about. As I drove away, I realized I had never exposed Travis, confronted Brooke, or chased the truth from either of them. Someone else's divorce had uncovered the platform. The preservation order had frozen the records. Discovery had begun moving those records beyond their reach, and the control they depended on disappeared one legal step at a time. I had spent years believing trust ended when someone chose to lie. Instead, I learned it truly ended the moment those lies became a method they were willing to teach other people. I never looked back at the house because the ending had already happened before I turned the key in the ignition. Brooke and Travis had built an entire system around changing the past whenever it became inconvenient. Yet the one thing they could never rewrite was the version preserved before they knew anyone was watching. I left without raising my voice because everything that mattered had already collapsed on its own. And for the first time in a very long time, I walked toward a future that no longer depended on believing someone else's carefully edited story.